I'm sure your methodology has changed over the years. I think it used to be a paper questionnaire.
Hmm.
Um, how how do you conduct your studies now?
Right now, we're actually in a transition period with our studies. Some have already moved to an online methodology. Others are being tested right now. We're still sticking as much as possible to the snail mail approach, primarily because it still produces a very high level response rate, high quality response rate.
How big is your response rate?
Right now, for most of the studies we're doing through the mail, we're over 50% response rate, which is pretty good, given the fact that if you look at response rates in other methodologies, you're generally in the 20 or lower percentages. Online, just because of the nature of the beast and the way the media landscape has changed, has become a necessary approach to doing research. It's not always the best approach. However, in a high anxiety world that we live in, the quicker turnaround time has become a much more significant issue, especially with the new, younger people coming into the research and media world who've grown up on computer technology. Their reliance on and knowledge of quality is not as significant as give me the results as fast as you can. So unfortunately, that's something you know we have to deal with as more senior research people. We're trying to understand the best qualitative approaches to monitoring these changes into the online world, and we're using our statistical expertise to try and correct whatever inadequacies there are with online.
So I know online is a much different methodology than paper.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't you, can't you actually ask a lot more questions? Isn't it more efficient and in some cases better methodologically
Yeah.
to do it online?
The problem with that, with online, is that's a fallacy. People think that going online gives you the opportunity to do longer surveys, more questions, when in fact the attention span of the person doing the interview online is probably maxing out at 20 minutes versus mailing a questionnaire where they can do at the you can go back and forth with the mail questionnaire. You could stop, take a break, have dinner, come back to the questionnaire whenever you want. um, you kind of restrict it to finding a question format to hold the consumer's attention. Once they leave the screen, there's a really diminishing return in terms of them coming back to complete the interview. So you want to keep that interview online flowing as best as possible with a minimal amount of questions. So we've evolved into trying to create shorter questions, more direct questions, less complicated scenarios online. You can't do as long an interview online. So if you're in a situation where you have a 40, 50-minute interview that you're dealing with, the way to approach it is to do match samples. So when we move our studies from the mail approach to online, instead of having one national sample, we end up having 4 or 8 national samples with shorter questionnaires to hold on to the viewer's attention. And that works. Okay, as long as you match those samples demographically, you apply the appropriate weights, you use the census data to help you uh, match and weight the sample demographics so that it's projectable to the total population, not just the online world, which is another issue you have to deal with when you do studies online, that you don't run the mistake of just having a study that's representative of people who go online. That's like 20% of the population that does 80% of the online usage that we see. So you have to be real careful as to how you select your samples, how you weight it, how you manage that approach. And the other thing that online has added and complicated is if you need to do studies with kids, you need parental permission under the age of 13. So you need to contact the parent. You need to make sure that they're with the child while they're doing the study online. So that's added to the expense of doing online research if you need to survey that segment of the population. So it's not all, positives in moving online. It is faster, there's no question about it, but it's created a situation where you have to do shorter surveys with more multiple samples involved to get what used to be a one questionnaire, one sample design. So it's created more work for statisticians, more IT involvement, more complicated database managing because you have to combine all those supplemental samples into one in the end. So it's created a more complicated set of issues for the research community, especially for the kind of syndicated studies that we do. But that's just part of the whole adaptation process. You need to do it. And eventually, by 4 or 5 years down the road, everybody we're dealing with is going to be raised on technology. So that's what we're aiming to move all our services.
How large is your sample size?
Our sample size ranges generally between 1,800 and 2,500 respondents, depending on the study. So we're in that range, and for the most part, we're producing stable data. You do have, because of the fragmentation out there for some cable networks and shows, smaller viewing levels. So in those cases, we do supplemental sampling to try and increase the stability, especially in the kids surveys that we do. We're always oversampling the children's marketplace and then weighting them back in line with the population to make sure the data is stable. So we're very focused on